Resilience, it is the fire that refines us. I've had the privilege of experiencing suffering that has, like a fire, helped to refine me, refine my character, refine my experiences, and transform my heart into a level of purity that sometimes we cannot reach unless we are tested with fire. But what does it mean to be resilient in today's world where we are highly exposed to not just stories, but the information that we have that sometimes can be a tool that we can use to grow, a tool that we can use to not just grow from our own stories, but from the stories of others. And today on Unscripted Synergy, where leadership meets humanity, we have the privilege of hosting and being joined by an amazing Rosheen Kriegler, who's going to take us through her own journey and share her own stories of how her own pain has been a birthing place for the wonderful and powerful person that she has become. So welcome on Unscripted Synergy. And I'm your host, Noxy, your fellow human. And good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm so well today and so privileged to be here with you today. And thank you for asking me to join you.
You're welcome. And thank you so much for joining. You're obviously one of the people that I respect a lot. I am incredibly inspired by your story and how, again, I have this picture in my mind, knowing the magnitude of the person that you are and that you've been for a very long time, knowing that you've also undergone some challenges that made you resilient. I feel very privileged and honored to be able to deepen, because sometimes we know what resilience is, but we don't have a sense of a deepened understanding of what it truly is and what it's not. Sometimes we think of resilience as endurance and survival, but it's so much more than that. Again, in just reflecting on today's conversation, I reflected on a very short story or experience that I had probably 3 years ago. I bought a flower and I then traveled and the flower died. And when I got back, I was so determined to make sure that the plant would come back to life. So I started watering it, speaking to it, and lo and behold, started seeing some yellow color popping up to say maybe there's a bit of life here, and eventually some green. And the flower saying, I'm back to life. And I kept it in my kitchen, very close to the sink. So essentially close to a water supply where I could easily water the plant every time I went to the kitchen. And after a long time of the flower, coming back to life and thriving, and I even got some compliments about how the flower has come back to life. But last year, surprisingly, I was looking at the flower and the plant, and what came to my spirit as I was looking at it was that I had only created enough conditions for the flower to survive, but it was not fully living. It was not fully alive and thriving as, the plant should. And that changed my life and how I see things somehow, because I think sometimes we create just enough conditions for us to survive, which is so much different from what resilience is. It is not just the mere act of survival, but it's what changes within us as we endure the things that we endure. So again, welcome,
Thank you.
Rosheen. Please introduce yourself to our people so that they get to know who you are.
Hi, I'm Rosheen. I'm Rosheen Kriegler, and I am in my 60s, and I am a pure feature of resilience. I have been through 60 years of and I'm sure everybody's resilience is different to each one, to every single one of us. And I give you the example. First of all, going back to your flower, you know what is quite interesting about that flower? I love that story, and I have a similar story of a girl that was, she was in a 12-step program, and when she was failing in her 12-step program, her orchid died. And as soon as she took the right steps to recondition herself, repurpose herself, and do the right thing, the orchid survived. But also, what you talk about, the resilience of your flower, yes, you watered it, but then you forgot to nurture it, you forgot to feed it. Because not only do you have to water it, but then you've got to give it an added benefit of now feeding it to grow and to multiply.
Yep.
Interesting. So when we talk about resilience, you know, resilience is different for every person. Your resilience, especially for your age, and my resilience is different. There are a lot of people. I know someone very close to me whose life is totally charmed, and his resilience is. I look at his feats in life and his woes in life, and throwing his hand up to his brow and saying, "Oh, woe is me." And I think to myself, that is just so minor. Is this really what is possibly stressing a human being? I mean, for me, that is not stress. You know, I'll give you an example. I went shopping and I couldn't find parking, and then someone scraped my bumper, and now my car has to go in for 6 days, and it has to be repolished and repurposed. I don't consider that resilience, if you understand what I'm saying. You know, but it's something that happened to someone, and it's the resilience. Now I have to do it. I take a tougher stance on that. And when I talk about resilience, each one of us is totally different. But I knew that my makeup when I was younger was, it was bring resilience on. Let me do what other people aren't doing. And and also I think it's a youthful, a lot of younger people do it, but especially for me. And you must also recall it was in the days before there were, the only thing we had in those days were telexes. And there were little strips of paper with little dots in them, and there were no phones and whatever. But for me, it was bring it on. And resilience was, you know, nothing can faze me, nothing can jar me, and bring it on. Because, in fact, if you bring the challenge on, I can manage the challenge, and the next time a challenge comes, it lessens the challenge because it becomes insignificant, because a bigger challenge will come along.
Yep.
And so also, I think it's got everything to do about being frightened. You know, if you've been brought up as cosseted and protected and treasured, and which a lot of us have, and some of us haven't. I was. But if you've been brought up in that fashion, it's a little bit more difficult to be resilient, because your fall is softer than someone who's had a less sort of a less blessed upbringing, if you understand what I mean.
So you talk about how resilience is different for all of us.
Totally.
But if we were to come up with a consolidated meaning of generally what resilience is, what would you say is the consolidated meaning that can cut across the board?
I would say the trials and tribulations that people experience in their life that are so different for what they might consider as to what you or I might consider.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a trial, and you would think, if only that were my tribulation, and that's why I think it's so totally different. It's an incredibly personal thing.
Awesome. So if you were to just go back in history, or even more recently, what is the one memory that comes to your consciousness or your heart or spirit that caused you to be resilient, and why does that particular story lingers, in your heart?
So a few years ago, I had a hiccup in my life, in my marriage, I had my own very successful company, and I had a hiccup, and it brought me to a place where I had no understanding. It took me to my beautiful farm in the Karoo that I had bought many, many years ago in 2005 as a recreational place for when I was experiencing so many tribulations, and it was a place for me to go and relax. I ended up at that farm, and everything that I had been taught in my life, and it was, I'm not particularly afraid of too much, but, lizards, leguanos, snakes, leopards, baboons. I was taken to my farm, and I had I had no choice but to make a success of it. So for me, that was the utmost of resilience. I would actually refer it to like someone who has been put in the desert and they're doing a marathon, or they're doing something that is totally out of their comfort zone. This was totally out of my comfort zone. It was not by choice, but as it so transpired and turned out, it was magnificent, and it became such a feat. And I had to reimagine myself, and I had to rethink of everything that I had ever done in a more imaginative way, in a more creative way, in order to make my product, which is now a guest house, to work. And this wasn't my forte. I mean, a guest house was not my forte. This is totally out my realm. I had stayed at guest houses all my life, beautiful hotels, traveled the world, and here I end up on this farm in the Karoo, and I had a farm in Africa, and I had to make it work. And that is what I call resilience, because I remember sitting on, when I arrived alone on the farm, and it was 2,550 hectares, and I looked on the wall and I saw water monitors and lizards and leguanos and things like that. Under normal circumstances, I would have run, or I would have called someone to please remove it for me. And I'm not terribly fearful. But I sat on, and I have to call it a stoep. I sat on the stoep and I thought to myself, you know what? You've got to get used to this. You have no one here to help you, protect you, to take the lizard off the light, or to collect an insect in your bed, or to catch a writhing snake. And you just have to get on with it. And that is what I call resilience, because that resilience was taking me totally out of my comfort zone, which was a 7-star comfort zone my whole life that I had conjured up for myself. I had worked towards, I had made, I was successful, and this was a little, it was a little trajectory, a little deepening of a groove in my life for experience. And, I don't know how, Knox, but I took that farm from zero and I made it to one of the most successful farms, guest farms, on perfect hideaways for 5 years running. And that is what I call resilience.
Amazing.
Yeah, that really is. And after that, everything paled into insignificance, because if I could have done that, anything was possible. Anything was possible.
Amazing. I love the story. And for someone who has had the privilege and actually an honor to be able to lose everything and build yourself up over and over again, what would you say are some of the things that remained unshaken, even with the challenges that you were facing at the time, and some of the things that had to die for you to rise up again?
I think the most important thing is resentment. You cannot even let resentment come into the factor, because it just eats you up. And the second thing is fear. I mean, you just got to get rid of fear. And the third thing is to take one day at a time. Don't look at the past, don't look at tomorrow, but in fact, just look at the next hour and not the previous hour, and just know that you can improve on it. And little tiny baby steps every single day, little baby steps transform into footprints, which transform into huge meters of success. And I think that possibly once you get onto the groove of that, it becomes joyous. And you do become totally, I would describe it as unafraid. Unafraid of, what? You've got everything around you that you should be afraid of. But it's to take yourself out of that realm, and the most important thing is to trust yourself. Because a lot of people would just faint and say, I can't do this, or whatever, and fall on, relatives, children, parents, whatever the circumstance. But everybody is capable. And resilience, as I reiterate to you once again, is different for everybody. Everybody. I know your resilience, and your resilience is magnificent. It's magnificent. My resilience is even more magnificent because I'm older than you.
I'm not sure about that. You have to fight it out.
We'll have to see who's more resilient. And that's what it's about. But it's a very personal thing, resilience. And I think it's an important thing that one is not afraid of resilience. Life isn't just one straight linear line. I mean, it does. Some people's lives go, little blip, 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 blip. Other people's lives go huge peaks and huge valleys and peaks and valleys, and it's all different for everybody else. Even people with little blip, 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 their resilience, they think, their uncomfortabilities in their life, they think are as big as yours. But you can't compare these things to that person.
True. I think it was Discovery. They've recently issued a study that shows that people between the ages of, in fact, people from the ages of 50 to upward, there's been a growing trend of suicide within that age group. What kind of strategies, or what sort of strategies would you give to those people in order for them to, to be more resilient and to live comfortably with difficulty in their lives?
I think it's important, first of all, to have faith in yourself before you even pass on to anybody else. You've got to have faith, and you've got to have comfort, and you've got to know that you can trust yourself. You can trust yourself, and that you like yourself. And it's very, very easy. I haven't seen that study on discovery, but I mean, I do hear and you do see so many more younger people are, and when I say younger people in their 40s and their 50s, are committing suicide. And the world is a hurly-burly, very uncomfortable place. It's probably more uncomfortable now than it's ever been. I'm a baby boomer, so I have never seen such change as all us baby boomers have within the last 20 years. Everything has just absolutely imploded and exploded. And I think it's important that one takes oneself out of your comfort zone all the time, even if you don't want to, because I think it's important to test your resilience all the time, to push the boundaries so that you can always come back and trust yourself.
How did pain and suffering, and the loss that you incurred in your own life change how you saw yourself, or how you reflected yourself to yourself and to the outside world?
Well, I managed to pull myself towards myself. I had to, as I say, sitting on the front stop of the manager's house on a farm, on a barren cement piece, and looking at water monitors and lizards and snakes, and looking into an abyss of 2,500 hectares of nothing, and thinking to myself, you've got to get this one. You have no choice. You have no choice. You've got to get this one. Otherwise, I don't know. There's not anybody waiting for you to pick you up. And I think that's important. I think it's important that life for everybody, nobody is unchallenged. And I think it's extraordinarily important to have faith within yourself. And I know so that a lot of people, struggle. They look at the right-hand side of themselves and they say, oh, you could do better, that you could have done better, that you compare yourself to someone else and you think, well, why couldn't I, or whatever. And that is, for me, it's the devil talking. And I rebuke you. How dare you say that? How dare you say that? I put myself in the middle and I negate all those ghastly thoughts, which everybody, it's an automatic disposition, go to, and I look at the positives. And I look, and I will not let that enter into my realm of thinking. Otherwise, it can destroy you. It can make you commit suicide. Yes, I understand.
Yeah. Very interesting. Just a thought I have. Maybe I'll just phrase it as a question, because I think this is important for me. If you were at the end of your life, maybe you're now 100, because I believe you lived to be 100, and you reflect back, at your life and how you lived it, what would you say was the purpose of the pain that you went through?
The purpose of the pain?
Yep.
The purpose of the pain was testing my intrepidness. The purpose of my pain, and I don't think that incidences happen just because. They're also there for a lesson. And there was a lesson there. I had failed in one particular arena, which was in a financial arena, because I had outsourced it to financial advisors, because this is not my forte. And I'm very good at marketing. I'm very good at promoting. I'm very good at garnering interest and making a product work. But you've got to also look at the back end of the product. And it's a very scary place, because you know what? If you are not trained in that arena, you obviously have to outsource it to someone else who has the skill, who has been, because I don't think one person can be accountable for everything. I don't think that a bookkeeper or a chartered accountant can run a guest farm with aplomb and fun, and it would all just be numbers. So I think it's important to have the balance, and I think that trust is an incredibly important factor in our life. One has to trust. You have to trust before you distrust.
It's very powerful. I normally tell people that in the space that I work in, trust is a currency. And I think trust is just as important in our lives, not in certain markets, but in who we are. And even more so when we trust what we have inside of us, because a lot of times we outsource our happiness. We seem to hold a belief that when the conditions are right, we'll be happier. People who are unemployed believe that as soon as they get a job, they'll be happier, they'll be less depressed. And they believe that, those who don't have children, they believe that once they have kids, they'll be much happier. And there are so many areas in our lives where we just outsource our happiness and our joy into, the hands of maybe other people, other views of people in terms of how they think of us and view us. But it seems that we neglect the inner work that we have to do.
True.
We neglect the fact that if we are to be happy, it has to come from within us, or even the things around us will not make us happy, because internally we don't hold very healthy views of who we are.
Exactly.
And how we make or get very good perspective of even the pain that we go through, whatever that we are enduring. So in your own life, I just want you to go back to this for me. How have you held space for others? Because I understand that you've learned so much from life. I mean, you keep on referring to the fact that you have had more than 60 years, probably over 70 now, of this practice, in life. How have you used some of the things that you've learned through your experiences and your suffering and the things that you've had and, to endure, to help others to uplift themselves and get out of their dark spaces?
I think empowering is a very important tool for anybody. And when I say empowering other people. And obviously you can't empower anybody unless you empowered yourself. Yeah. So you have to have a good sense of value of yourself or self-value, should I say, before you can, sort of reach out and you can empower other people. But I think you've always got to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I will give you an example. The other day, something happened, and it was like a parking space or something very innocuous, something that was terribly not important.
Thank you. And something against parking spaces. You've mentioned that twice already.
Have I?
Must have a very huge impact on you.
Yeah, because people are so extraordinary when it comes to it. So this man came with this huge rage on his face, and he was red in the face or whatever, and he was there to fight. And I said, hi. I said, hello, how are you? You having a good day? What? Did I take your parking space or whatever? And he said, yes, you did take my parking. People commit suicide over parking spaces.
Oh.
And I said to him, you know what? I'm terribly sorry. I didn't realize that you were. And how I'm describing it to you is that someone else's reaction would be to confront and to raise the tempo and raise your voice and to have an argument, and two parties walking away totally unsettled, angry, and mad for a few hours thereafter. So let's take the parking space away. But when I see people, and I think it's terribly important for me, not for anybody else, is that when I see people, I always acknowledge them. I say hello to them. How's your day? Where are you from? What are you doing? I take an interest in other people because there's so few people out there that take an interest in anybody else. And if I can just engender some kind of feeling of when I walk out a shop or I walk out wherever and they said, that was a nice person. I think I've done something good. And I do it deliberately. Whether it's a petrol attendant or wherever I am. I always make that person feel good because I know what it's like when people make me feel good.
Yeah, sounds good. I've interacted with a number of entrepreneurs, and I think entrepreneurs are naturally some of the most resilient people.
You have to be.
What are some of the things that you learned through entrepreneurship that you have found applicable in your entire life? And what lessons did you learn in your entrepreneurial journey that you feel have been so evident in how you live your life today and how you deal with, with pain and discomfort in your personal life?
First of all, I love a challenge. And in my early life, it was quite extraordinary. After having had my daughter, sort of like a few years thereafter, I thought there's got to be more to life than just going to children's parties. And I started my own business, and it was a very interesting business, and it was a very interesting time because it was in the 60s, 50s, 60s, in the early 70s, and the very early 80s, that nobody was really traveling. China hadn't opened. We were still on telex. We had we had international telephones. Nobody in China really spoke English and whatever. And that is where I started off my first journey. And I was asked by one of my customers to find a particular product. And it was a product that I didn't know, and it was called BOPP, bi-orientated polypropylene. And he said, find me BOPP and don't you ask me where it comes from, what it is, and that is the story. And I was put up to the challenge. It was the most exciting challenge I had in my life because I thought, you couldn't go to a dictionary and you couldn't open BOPP. You couldn't go to Apple. You couldn't go to Google. We didn't have computers. I sort of found out what it was. I found that it was an bio-orientated polypropylene. I found it was an oil-based product, but there was nowhere or nobody to tell you where you were able to source it. So because I was familiar with China and I'd been working out of China for some time, with hand language, because nobody spoke English and I didn't speak Chinese, and I went to Thailand and I went around the world. And it was the biggest challenge for me to find this product. And in fact, they should make a movie about it. It's hilarious. And I kind of found it in India, but it didn't have a food grade, and I didn't know about food grades in those days because it was for a biscuit product in South Africa. And then straight from there, I thought I'd like to go and see Dubai before the Burj Al Arab had even been built. And I went and I said to the taxi driver, I'm looking for BOPP. He said, oh, there are 100 factories in the free ports. And it's a case of asking, investigating, finding, looking, seeing. It's like an Easter hunt. When I was a little girl, we had Easter hunts. Not everybody has Easter hunts. I mean, but in my religion and tradition, we had Easter hunts. It's like finding the Easter egg. It was just so fulfilling to find this product, and then like Noxy from like your company, taking it from zero to hero. Where it's a very brave thing to do, and it's an exciting thing to do. I mean, you sort of knock down now and again, but up you get and on you go.
Yep, it's very important to always rise like that. And what was the role of, or rather, what is the role of community in your life? Who are the people who are helping you hold space when you're not okay? And what's the importance and role of family in helping you build more and more resilient or stay resilient?
What is extraordinary is I was just marking it the other day. What is extraordinary is that I have 4 very close friends that I speak to on a daily basis. The one I've known for 45 years, and you know who she is.
No, I don't. But
and the second girlfriend and the third girlfriend have been in my life for over 35 years. And they play an extraordinarily important part of my life. We have always been in contact. We speak to each other on a daily basis. I've ever been troubled or vice versa, and we've engaged in conversation. And to me, sometimes I do have a brother, and I do have family, but these conversations are not for family. These conversations are for people who I choose to be my family. I have a daughter who has 2 children and a lovely husband and a beautiful, but she's hectic with her life. I mean, life is so hectic now, more so than when I was 40. And you have these people that you've grown with, and they understand you. They understand your DNA, and it's happened to them, and good things, indifferent things, wonderful things, and their learning paths and your learning paths and amalgamated together is enormously powerful.
it's true.
Enormously powerful to care for each other, and for years and years. And I mean, I can't believe that my one girlfriend, I mean, for 45 years, it's just fantastic. And we're close.
I would like to have someone who's prepared to deal with my crap for over 45 years.
But it's not always crap, Remember?
I'm crap defined.
No, that is
I'm
absolutely...
kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
It's lovely to share the challenges. It's lovely to share the wondrous things that have opened in their lives. It's the difficulties and how they're dealing with it, and the synchronicities.
I love that word. We obviously live in a more digitally inclined world that has made it a little bit hard to foster new relations and connections. How do you stay in touch with, your community and your support system? And how would you advise, people to build those communities for themselves? Because I think, building a healthy community is what will carry you through your most difficult times. But again, we live in a more digitally inclined world where connection has become almost impossible.
Absolutely.
How do we how do we get back to the game and just try to use the resources that we have to build, connections and community?
I think, I think they're, so, yeah. So what I'm finding, because I'm new to Cape Town, that there are so many digital nomads. And there's so many people that have come from all over the world, and they're sort of sharing houses, and they sit at their computers all day, and they don't really have a life thereafter because they don't know anybody. And, meeting people online. I think the healthy way of doing it is like joining clubs, like joining a hiking club or joining a canoeing club or hockey or paddle or tennis, and especially if you are totally alone. And in order to break into a community, take up a sport or learn to play bridge. And I'm not talking about doing it online, like doing bridge online, because once again, you're online, but definitely to have human contact or to offer your volunteer work. Or I think it's incredibly important to interact with other people. You've got to feel the heartbeat of another person, because a computer doesn't have a heartbeat. It might be clever, it might have AI, it might have you taped, it might have listened to your whole conversation and then re-recorded a more intelligent one, they think. But it hasn't got a heartbeat.
True.
Eavesdropping on you.
It has an artificial heartbeat. What do you feel about this? As you were, sharing, I was just thinking about how trauma makes people build walls instead of building bridges. Is that where you found yourself when you were going through whatever that you were going through, that you were using whatever that you have emotionally to create, walls instead of building bridges so that you can connect with other people?
I didn't have time. With my trauma, I didn't have time to keep it to myself. And when I say I didn't have time to keep it, I was so intent on creating a new lifestyle and intent on supporting myself and creating something magnificent. I didn't think of trauma. I couldn't. There was no time for trauma. I was dealing with wonderful staff that were right behind me. I was dealing with a situation and a circumstance where nobody would really want to find themselves, and the kindness of people, of neighbors, who had wine farms and people in a community, and small communities are extraordinarily helpful. They really, really help. It's not like a big city. So I never had time for trauma. And I really and truly, I have to be perfectly honest, I never had time for trauma. Then I had a wonderful friend who came very bravely, who's terrified of all the things that I've mentioned, snakes and water monitors and lizards and these indigenous creatures. And she was a great help. And it was wonderful that we could laugh about our ridiculous fears. And everybody is good at certain things. I'm not good at driving a Land Rover, but I went through raging rivers because I had to go through raging rivers. But when my friend Sandra had actually come to the farm, we could laugh about it. She said, "Did you see? I mean, your bra strap was hanging out of the window," or, you could laugh about ridiculous things that could have scarred anybody. But you can take the good out of it. And, the extraordinary thing is that so many people came into our life at that point in time, and it was after COVID, in COVID time, and everybody who was part of the drama and the trauma of COVID and was in that area, and everybody who was in shutdown are great friends of mine today. And everybody the people that I'm describing to you lost their businesses. They were in travel and they were doing different things. And they've now everybody sort of wiggled out of their uncomfortable mode and found a new place to be in, a new occupation.
Interesting. I love that. This is just my observation, based on the role of communities in helping us, become more resilient. I've found that there's a culture of shame that gets created in our, spaces, whether societally or even in the communities that we build around ourselves, where instead of vulnerably embracing where you are, you sort of hold it back and hold it in because you feel that when you share your story from a very authentic place, you'll be shamed. And that's primarily because you already have embraced your story as shameful, because sometimes people think of failure as shameful. They think of being challenged to a certain extent as shameful. And unfortunately, that's what some communities do as well. How do you ensure that you are not trapped in that culture of shame, but that you can rise above it and vulnerably reflect your own story to yourself and to others?
I was actually enormously fortunate in my early 30s. I I didn't realize that, alcoholism ran rife in my family, from generation to generation. And you don't know whenever that gene is going to hit you. But I did notice that my drinking was out of control, in the sense that, I'd go out for dinner and I'd say I'm going to have half a bottle of wine, and I would have a whole bottle of wine. And I wouldn't behave in the fashion that I normally would have if I had had half a bottle of wine. And it really became a problem for me. And then I discovered that with everything in life, there is a solution. I found Alcoholics Anonymous. And they had it in little church meetings. And I always thought, oh, my dear, an alcoholic is a man who sits on a park bench and he's got a raincoat on and he feeds pigeons and he's got his whiskey and his raincoat. That's what I thought an alcoholic was. But it's not only an alcoholic program, but it's a 12-step program that has helped many people throughout the year, whether you are a food addict, a sex addict, you drink too much, you eat too much, whatever, anything that is too much in your life, there is a 12-step program. And it's cut out for anybody. You don't have to have an addiction to understand how to work the rules of life. You have to admit to yourself that you have a problem and how you're going to prevent it. And they're communities, and they're wonderful all over South Africa. We're talking here, all over the world. I mean, I can go to London tomorrow and I can walk into a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, even though I'm not a drug addict, or I can walk into a sex addict meeting, even though I'm not a sex addict. But they're all based on 12-step, or I can walk into an Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever. And that is one of the most powerful tools that has helped millions of people all over the world. Millions of, and it's a community, and it doesn't matter who you are, what your riches, or what you don't have in your life. Everybody is on the same level. Everybody's on the same level.
Indeed.
Powerful, very powerful.
And dealing with shame, how would you say, you were able to navigate that culture of shame while you were building your resilience or going through whatever that you were going through?
I never had shame. And I think it's something, it depends on the personality of the person. I consider myself to be extraordinarily courageous. I don't have shame, didn't have shame, and still don't have shame. So was I disappointed in myself? Things happen. life happens. I've done extraordinary things in my life, and I've done ridiculous things in my life that I can castigate myself for, but shame I don't have. I don't have shame. I mean, it's the absolute opposite of when I was at the zenith of my career or the height of my career. I mean, shame is such a polar opposite. I never had ego, if you understand. And I think ego and shame go together. So if you've got this huge, enormous ego and things go all right for you, you're going to suffer shame.
Truly agree. We are now at the end of our podcast. I would just love you to speak on the last thing. You know, the last time you spoke about the importance of gratitude and why it's important to keep a gratitude diary or journal. I would just ask you this question a little bit differently. If you were to thank your child self, your younger self, what would you thank yourself for?
I would determination and courage. I had courage and I had determination as a little girl. Huge determination. And I look at that little girl often. And I look at that little girl and I look at her and I think, what a brave little girl you were. What a brave little girl you were. And I look at her, upon her, with love and saying, wowee, have we had one hell of a ride.
I love that. Now I need you to speak to our audience. We obviously want our, platform to speak a lot to leaders. These are not positional leaders. They could be leading in whatever place and whatever sphere of society. What would be the one thing that you would say to them in terms of how they can best build that muscle of resilience in their lives and in their leadership?
You've got to look for it. You've got to don't look for the easy way out. It's a horrid. Look for the difficult way. Look at the most imposing way. It's so much more. It's so much more. When I say it's so much more comforting to find an easy path, but choose things, circumstances, lessons that are difficult, because when you have to come to resilience, it won't be so difficult for you. It won't be so difficult. So really and truly don't. It's so easy to slip and slide and, I don't like that. It's uncomfortable. Just bring it on. And I say, Noxy, a gratitude list every single night. One should do. And I don't talk about the trials and the tribulations, but I talk about the gratitudes of the day, which I write to myself every day on my computer.
At least you write on your computer. You're not as ancient as I thought you are.
Whoa, the art of writing has come back.
Thank you so much, people. There you have it. We've just been told that we must pursue pain and hardship, because it's only in a place of hardship and pain that we are going to be more resilient.
Absolutely.
And learn and grab those lessons that we need to advance to the next level of our lives. So I hope you enjoyed this installment of our podcast and that you've been greatly inspired by our wonderful guest, Rosheen. So thank you so much. It's been an honor again, and thank you.
Thank you, Nox. And I've known you for many years and you're an inspiration.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, Auntie.